What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another POV card counting episode. I'm very excited for this video. As you can see from the title, I took a trip to Vegas and I got tons of great footage. Vegas is an interesting spot. There's tons of high quality games all over the place, but the casinos are very aware of this. In turn, they have some of the sharpest surveillance in the world. The backoffs are very quick, and once the flyer is out, it almost seems like the next casino is waiting for you to get there just so they can do it all over again. This isn't my first time to Vegas, so my name is in their system as well as my face in some cases. Some places on this trip wouldn't even let me buy in because they already knew who I was, and that can get frustrating. Regardless, it's still a good spot to hit because if you're lucky, you'll catch some shifts sleeping. I was able to get just over 12 hours in, over 27 sessions, all taking place within 4 days. This was a team trip with some friends, which means we were combining our hours. But for my videos, I will be just talking about my own sessions and how things were from my point of view. As always, I'll be using the high-low count system no matter what game I'm playing. Whether it's 8-deck or double-deck, high-low is equally effective once you calculate a true count. If you want to learn how the high-low system works, check out the video I made called How to Count Cards. It's got everything you need to know. I'm also playing perfect basic strategy and using many count-based deviations in order to maximize my advantage. My bet spread will be slightly different than normal on this trip. Here is my updated spread. The 2-hand spread is basically the same, except I'm now maxing out at 2 hands of 1200 at a true 7. On my solo spread, I keep the bets lower than usual in the lower counts, but once we hit a true 5, it's on and we will spread up to 1 hand of 2000. So without further ado, let's get into the first day. My first spot that I wanted to hit was a place called Resorts World. Here's how that went. They have a very high quality double deck game here, and I was hoping to get some good time in. I hadn't played here for about 6 months, so I was thinking they'd forgotten about me a long time ago. They requested ID, and since I'm pretty young and get ID'd all the time, I had to show it. If I didn't, I'd be asked to leave the table area, so showing ID is really the only option if I want to play. I sat for a few minutes while some phone calls were made, and eventually a pit boss came over and had some news for me.
Yeah.
We prefer you don't play any blackjack.
Okay.
Play anything else you like.
Sure.
So yeah, it was an instant back off, which sucked because I was really hoping to get some time at this game, but there's nothing to do except move on to the next spot, and I already knew where that was going to be. Another casino with a very high quality double deck game is the Win. The only problem with the Win is that if you don't get there early enough, the table min is several $100s, which is too expensive. Since it was around noon, I walked in expecting the min to be $100 to $200, but much to my disliking, it was already up to $500, and it was a no-go for the Win. Let's just take a sec to acknowledge that there was 2 people playing $500 mins at 2 separate tables on the main floor of a casino at noon on a Monday. Talk about dedication. Right beside the Win is a sister property called Encore. They have the exact same game as the Win, so I headed over there thinking that they might have some lower limits.
Hi. 300 men. Too much. Thanks anyway. Did you think they'd let me play 200?
Maybe.
Hi. Can I play 200 men on the blackjack?
Yeah. Holly? You can use
No.
What about your ID?
I've got ID.
So they let me play a $200 minimum, which is acceptable as long as the deck penetration is better than 0.75. They took ID, but everything checked out and they okayed the buy-in. I began playing at a $200 minimum, and I got 1 hand in until the dealer had a shift change. Right as the next dealer was about to begin, the pit boss, who was on the phone, told her to wait a minute. I sat there for a few minutes and chatted with the dealer. The staff here were super nice, and even though I knew the back off was likely about to happen, it wasn't a hostile environment at all. Eventually, a suited individual came into the room and asked to talk to me.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
You too.
So we're not going to have you play blackjack anymore.
Okay.
You can play all the other games. You can still use your comps here, all that such, as long as you don't play blackjack.
Okay.
If you play again or plays a refusal, then I'd have to trespass you from the property. Is that fair?
Yeah, I'll leave.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Nice meeting you.
Yeah, have a good one. Let's learn that, please.
So yeah, this spot was also a no-go. It's hard to beat that ID check if you've shown ID at a place you've been backed off before. I gotta say, this was one of the most respectful backoffs I've ever received, so that was nice at least. I wasn't gonna get discouraged though, just because these first spots had been difficult. I was itching to get some table time and decided to go to a spot I knew would have a playable table for me. Next on my list was a place called Mohegan. This place has a decent double deck game, but some dealers cut pretty bad. We're talking one deck cut. However, it's a low table minimum, so that's playable all day long. I did get ID'd here as well, but this time it was legitimately just an age check. The dealer checked my date of birth and handed it back to me without a pit boss phoning it in. Because I'm going to actually sit down and play this time, I'll quickly list the game conditions. As I said, it is a double deck game. Dealer will hit soft 17, double after a split is allowed, and you may double any first 2 cards. There is no resplit aces or surrender. During my session, the dealers cut off around 1 deck from play, so the penetration was right around 50%, which is still playable at a low minimum bet. For this spot, I played a $50 minimum bet. And now we're finally going to get into some actual gameplay. As always, thank you everyone for watching. If you guys are enjoying the video so far, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, it helps me out a lot. I played through 4 hands of minimum bets until the count reached a true 2. I wasn't playing solo, so I put out 2 hands of 200. I was dealt a 19 and a 9 versus dealer 6. I stood the 19 and I doubled the 9, receiving an 8 for 17. Dealer drew to 23, so these first 2 hands were paid out. The count was now at a true 6, and even though I had a good sized stack of chips in front of me, I didn't have enough to do my 2 hands of 1,000. I had to buy in for more to fund my bets, and I always kind of cringe in situations like this, because I just feel like it looks so odd to buy in for another several $100s when you already have a ton of chips in front of you, and then just max bet all of it. I feel like it's a total card counter thing to do. Regardless, I bought in and put out my 2 hands of 1,000. I was dealt a 19 and a 13 versus dealer 7. Of course, I stood the 19 and hit the 13, turning it into a good old 23, so that was a loss. Dealer drew to 25, so at least my first hand won. That was the end of the shoe, and I was now back to minimum bets. I decided to throw out a $100 bet just for the first hand of the next shoe, as well as a dealer tip to avoid going all the way back down to minimum bet. I only ever do this if I finish the shoe at max bets in an attempt to throw off the surveillance a bit. I lost this first bet, then played 1 hand at minimum until the count raised to a true 2 by the 3rd hand. I put out my 2 hands of 200 and was dealt a 20 and a pair of aces versus dealer's 10. I stood the 20 and split the aces, turning them into a hand of 14 and 12, which is just so garbage, and the dealer flipped an 8 for 18, so I lost the splits and won the first hand. The rest of the hands in that shoe were negative, so we will fast forward through that. When the next shoe came around, I lowered my minimum bet to $25 because the back off was likely going to come soon and it was time to maximize my EV. This next shoe was mostly negative until the very last hand, where I was dealt a pair of 3s versus a dealer's 4 at a true 1. I split the 3s, turning the first hand into a 9, which I doubled on, and I received a 4 for 13. The second split hand received an 8 for 11. I also doubled that one and received a 10 for 21. The dealer drew to 23, so both hands were paid out. Once again, that was the last hand of the shoe, so time to fast forward. I played an entire shoe in the negative, so we will skip that, and eventually the count got back up to a true 1. Here I was dealt a blackjack and paid $150, then I won this borderline true 1 bet that was a double, and after that we were back up to a true 2. I put out my 2 hands of 200 and was dealt a 16 and a soft 16 versus dealer's 4. I stood the 16, doubled the soft 16, and then the dealer drew to 20. My double card was flipped and it was a 10, so both my hands lost here. The count was now up to a true 3, and I raised my bet to 2 hands of 300. I was dealt a 13 and a 12 versus dealer 6, and I stood on both. Dealer drew to 23, so both of these hands won. That was the last hand of the shoe, and after this I played a few shoes in the negative. I was getting more time here than expected, so I put my minimum bet back up to 50 at times, unless the count was very negative, where I would either wong out or go back down to $25. Just to be clear with you guys, when I simmed this game to calculate the hourly EV, I had my minimum bet set at 50, so anytime I wonged out or got out a $25 minimum bet, it was just bonus EV, and it wasn't a super big deal if I had to fluctuate between $25 or $50 minimum bets. Anyways, I played through a few more negative shoes here, with the count hitting true 1 a handful of times. Here I was dealt a 13 versus dealer's 4, I stood and the dealer drew to 20, so this one was no good. On this one I was dealt a 15 versus 10, sadly there was no surrender, so I had to hit and busted. After that I was dealt a pair of aces versus dealer's 10, I split and turned them into a hand of 14 and 21. dealer drew to 18, so I lost one hand and won the other. Here I was dealt an 8 versus dealer's 10, I hit and turned it into 18, dealer drew to 17, so this hand was paid out. Still at a true 1, I was dealt a 20 versus dealer's 6. I stood and figured it would be an easy win, but nope, dealer drew to 21 and it was a loss. Count was now up to a true 2, so I raised my bet to 2 hands of 200. I was dealt a soft 13 and a 12 versus dealer's 8. I turned the soft 13 into a 17 and the 12 into a 22, so that was a loss. I was hoping for a dealer bust, but again the dealer drew to 21, so both hands lost. I tried again with another 2 hands of 200. I was dealt a 14 and a 15 versus dealer's 10. I busted on the 14 and turned the 15 into a 19. Dealer drew to 24, so at least I won this hand. The count had now jumped to a true 3, so I raised my bet to 2 hands of 300. I was dealt a 19 and a 15 versus dealer's 3. I stood on both, and the dealer drew to 22, so both hands were paid out. That was the last hand of the shoe, so I was now back down to minimum bets. I played a few hands into the next shoe until the count raised to a true 1, so out went my bet of $100. It was at this point that someone in a suit had walked up on the right side of me and had some words for me.
Expert. You can't really play with 21 anymore, but you're welcome to play any of their games. You're leaving me?
Good luck.
We got 2,000. Sir, good luck to you.
Good night, guys.
So as you guys can see, I finally got the back off. Once again, it was very respectful and not like it's portrayed in the movies at all. All in all, my session was 46 minutes long, hourly EV calculated out to be $322 an hour, and my session profit was $810. Pretty uneventful session, all things considered. After this session at Mohegan, I hit the Bellagio, which surprisingly ended up being a monster session nearly 3 hours long and very profitable. I'm going to save this session for its own video because I didn't have a single negative shoe in those 3 hours, and I have tons of footage in the high counts. You guys are going to love it. Anyways, my next session after Bellagio was at a casino called Fontainebleau. I don't actually know how to say it correctly, so I'll just put up its name on the screen. I was trying to play their double deck game, which is very high quality, but by this time the table minimum had raised to $300 and it was unplayable. I had noticed a 6-deck game on the main floor that was also pretty decent, so I decided to make that my target. Once again, this is a 6-deck game. Dealer will stand on soft 17, resplit aces is allowed, double after split is allowed, and you may double any first 2 cards. There's also late surrender. Dealer cut off about 1.5 decks from play, so the deck penetration was around 75%, which is pretty decent. Once again, they asked for my ID, and the pit boss took it over to her little counter and started browsing on the computer, so I figured my time here would be quick. This was a $50 minimum game, and the count quickly jumped up to a true 1. Out went my bet of $100, and I was dealt a 10 versus dealer's 3. I doubled, and the dealer drew to 19, so I was hoping for a face card underneath. No such luck, I had a 7 underneath, so I lost this one. I tried again and was dealt a 12 versus dealer's 2. I hit and got a 7 for 19. Dealer also drew to 19, so this was a push. The count was now up to a true 2, so I raised my bet to 2 hands of 200. I was dealt a 20 and a 17 versus dealer's 10. I stood on both, and dealer drew to 25, so both hands were paid. The count was now back down to a true 1, so I put out a $100 bet. I was dealt 19 versus 4, of course I stood, and the dealer drew to 26, meaning this hand was also paid. Next, I was dealt a 13 versus 5, again I stood, and dealer drew to 19, so this was a loss. Here I was dealt a 16 versus 2, dealer drew to 18, so this was also a loss. Next hand I was dealt another 16, this time versus 10, and this game offered a surrender option, so I did that and lost half my bet. After that, I was dealt an 18 versus 7, I stood, and dealer drew to 20, so this hand was no good. Still a true 1, and I was dealt a 20 versus dealer's 2, dealer drew to 19, so this hand was a win. For the last hand at true 1, I was dealt a 17 versus 7, I stood, and the dealer drew to 22, so this hand also won. And right as I was about to open up another 2 hands of 200, I was pulled off the table and given some bad news.
Come on, man, word with you real quick. Sure. You can grab the money. Alright, you can't play 21. Keep coming back, man. Don't come back. Alright. You can play all of the games but 21. Alright.
So as you guys just saw, another back off, this time much quicker than the last spot. All in all, I got 6 minutes in before getting the tap. My hourly EV was $355 an hour, and total session profit was exactly $0, so I didn't win anything, I didn't lose anything, which is kinda rare and always funny to see. So as you guys can gather from what I've shown you so far, their surveillance is very sharp here in Vegas. They're good at their jobs, and 90% of the time they're gonna sniff you out very quickly. However, like I said earlier, I was able to get just over 12 hours here on my trip, and I've shown less than an hour of gameplay in this video, so there's much more to come. I'm going to end it here. The next video will have some more footage of very high quality games and some more quick backoffs, but most of it will be gameplay. I think this video has made it apparent how sweaty and quick to back off Vegas is, but I want to show you guys that it's still possible to get some decent sessions in, even in the most sweaty city in the entire country. Remember to check out Blackjack Advisors if you're interested in fast tracking your advantage blackjack training and networking with other players. They offer live stream sessions for all skill levels, Q&As, member chat, giveaways, and more. It's definitely worth the money if you're serious about advantage blackjack. Thanks again for watching everyone. I'll see you all in the next video.